For months. To be clear also, he is innocent until proven guilty. I'll talk about what this all means. But ever since...
No warning, no buildup, just a name suddenly tied to something far darker than anyone expected. D4vd, an artist known for emotional music and a rapidly rising career, is now being mentioned in connection with a homicide case. And not just casually. An arrest has been made, a family has spoken out, and the narrative is already starting to split in two. Because what looked like a distant tragedy is now brushing up against a public figure and raising a question that no one can ignore. How did this connection even happen? And what does it actually mean? At the center of everything is one question. Is this a case of proximity or something more serious? Because being connected to a crime can mean many things. It can be indirect, it can be circumstantial, or it can be something that pulls someone much closer to the core of the situation than the public is ready to accept. And right now, the information available is limited, but the implications are already massive. Here's what is confirmed so far based strictly on available reporting. A homicide case involving a victim named Celeste Rivas Hernandez has drawn public attention. Following the incident, an arrest was made, marking a critical step in the investigation. Authorities have not publicly disclosed every detail, but the situation has already escalated beyond a local case due to one key factor: a reported connection to D4vd. That connection has not been fully explained in detail, but it was significant enough to be mentioned in coverage of the arrest. And that alone shifted the story from a standard criminal case into something with broader public visibility. At the same time, the victim's family has broken their silence. Their statements focus on grief, loss, and the need for accountability, bringing emotional weight back to the center of the story. It's important to stay precise here. There is no confirmed claim that D4vd committed any crime. There is no official statement placing him at the scene. What exists is a reported connection and an ongoing investigation. And in situations like this, that distinction matters more than anything. This story didn't just gain attention because of the crime itself. It exploded because of who might be connected to it. D4vd is not an unknown name. He's part of a new generation of artists who built their careers quickly, online, publicly, and with a highly engaged audience. That level of visibility changes everything, because when a public figure is even loosely tied to a serious situation, the reaction is immediate. People don't wait for full details. They don't wait for official clarification. They react. And that's exactly what happened here. The moment his name appeared in connection to the case, the narrative shifted. It stopped being just about the victim or the investigation and started becoming a broader discussion involving reputation, speculation, and public perception. But here's the critical part. The lack of clear information is what fuels the intensity. When details are incomplete, people fill in the gaps themselves. And those assumptions can spread faster than verified facts. That's why this situation feels bigger than it technically is right now. Because the unknown is doing most of the work. At first glance, the story seems straightforward. A tragic incident, a victim, an arrest. That's where it should have ended, as a serious but localized case. But then the first layer shifted. Initially, the focus was entirely on the victim and the arrest. The facts were limited but clear enough to establish the seriousness of the situation. People followed the story as they would any major criminal case, with concern, but without widespread speculation. Then came the detail that changed everything. A connection. Not fully explained, not deeply detailed, but enough to introduce a new name into the conversation. And that name carried weight. Once D4vd's name entered the narrative, attention moved. It didn't disappear from the victim, but it split. Now there were two parallel conversations happening at once. One about justice for Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and one about what this connection could mean for a rising artist. And this is where tension begins to build. Because the public doesn't process these two things equally. The emotional weight of the crime remains, but curiosity about the celebrity connection starts to dominate the conversation. And then something else happens. People start asking questions that don't yet have answers. This is where things become unstable. Without full context, every small detail becomes significant. Every mention becomes amplified. What kind of connection is this? How direct is it? Why was his name included at all? And importantly, should it have been? Because in situations like this, even a vague association can be misinterpreted. And once that happens, the narrative becomes difficult to control. What makes this even more intense is what hasn't been said. There has been no detailed clarification publicly explaining the exact nature of the connection. And silence, in a situation like this, doesn't calm things down. It does the opposite. It creates space. Space for speculation. Space for assumptions. Space for narratives that may not reflect reality at all. And that's when a story stops being about facts and starts being about perception. At this point, the situation is no longer just about what happened. It's about what people think happened. And those two things are rarely the same. And this is where the situation becomes the most difficult to control. Because once public perception takes over, facts alone are no longer driving the story. Now it's interpretation. People begin connecting dots that may not actually connect. They start building timelines without confirmed data. And most importantly, they begin assigning meaning to a connection that hasn't been fully defined. That's a dangerous turning point. Because in reality, a connection could mean many things. It could be social. It could be indirect. It could be something as simple as knowing someone within the same circle. But online, those distinctions often disappear. Everything gets compressed into one simplified narrative. If the name is there, it must matter. And that's not always true. At the same time, the victim's story risks being overshadowed. Celeste Rivas Hernandez is no longer just the center of a tragedy. Her story is now being shared alongside speculation that may not even be relevant to her case. Her family's voice becomes critical here. Because while the public debates connections and implications, they are focused on something much more immediate: loss, justice, accountability. And that contrast between public speculation and personal grief creates a tension that defines the entire situation. There are two central sides to understand here. Right now, he exists in a very specific position, one shaped not by confirmed actions but by association. There is no verified claim placing him at the scene, no official accusation of wrongdoing. But his name appearing in connection to the case has already changed how he is being perceived. And perception, especially for a public figure, can have real consequences. Silence, whether intentional or not, adds another layer. Because without clarification, people interpret the absence of information in their own way. Some see caution, others see uncertainty. But without facts, none of those interpretations can be confirmed. Celeste Rivas Hernandez and her family. At the center of all of this is a victim, and her family has made it clear what matters most to them: acknowledgement of what happened, respect for her life, and a clear path toward justice. Their decision to speak publicly shifts the tone of the story, because it brings everything back to reality. This is not just a trending topic. This is not just speculation. This is a real loss affecting real people. And their voice acts as a reminder of what should not be lost in the noise. Even without confirmed wrongdoing, the situation is already serious. For D4vd, the risk is reputational. In today's environment, association alone can shape public opinion, sometimes permanently. And once a narrative forms, it can be incredibly difficult to reverse, even if new information later changes the picture. For the case itself, the stakes are even higher. A homicide investigation requires clarity, accuracy, and focus. But when external attention shifts toward unrelated or unclear connections, it can complicate how the story is understood publicly. And most importantly, there is a risk that attention moves away from where it should be: the facts of the case, the victim, the pursuit of justice. That imbalance is what makes this situation more than just another headline. The most important detail in all of this is what we don't fully know. The exact nature of the connection has not been clearly defined, and that single gap changes everything. Because without that clarity, every interpretation remains incomplete. It's possible that the connection is minor. It's possible that it's indirect. It's possible that it has no bearing on the crime itself. But until that is explicitly confirmed, the uncertainty remains. And that uncertainty is what keeps the story alive. Not new facts, not new evidence, just the absence of a clear explanation. Right now, this story is still unfolding. An arrest has been made, a family is seeking justice, and a public figure's name has entered a narrative that may or may not involve him in any meaningful way. Those three elements are moving at different speeds, The investigation will follow evidence, the family will continue to speak from grief, and the public will continue to react, often faster than the facts can catch up. So the real question isn't just what happened, it's what will be clarified next, and whether that clarification will change how this entire situation is being perceived right now. Because at this moment, we are not looking at a finished story. We are watching one take shape in real time. What do you think this connection actually means? Is this a case of public speculation moving too fast? Or is there something more that hasn't been revealed yet? Let me know how you see it. Because right now, the biggest part of this story might still be the part we don't fully understand.